He would be particularly aware of the addictive nature of social media platforms, understanding that they are designed to capture and hold attention through psychological manipulation techniques. He would study these mechanisms not to use them, but to protect himself from them, maintaining his agency and freedom of choice in how he engaged with digital technology. Marcus Aurelius would approach social media platforms like a skilled diplomat approaching a foreign court, understanding the customs and motivations of his hosts while never losing sight of his own interests and values. The Roman emperor would educate himself about the business models of social media platforms, understanding that if a service is free, then the users are the product being sold to advertisers. This knowledge would help him maintain a healthy skepticism about the recommendations, suggestions, and content that platforms show him, recognizing that these are designed to maximize engagement and advertising revenue rather than his personal growth or well-being. Marcus Aurelius would be particularly wary of the way social media platforms use artificial intelligence to create personalized content bubbles that can gradually shift our opinions and behaviors. Without our conscious awareness, he would regularly expose himself to diverse perspectives and ideas outside of what algorithms recommend, ensuring that his worldview remained broad and nuanced rather than narrow and polarized. How Marcus Aurelius would handle social media in 2025. Video script. Imagine if Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher who ruled nearly 2,000 years ago, suddenly found himself in 2025 with a smartphone in his hand and access to every social media platform imaginable. How would this man who wrote Meditations, one of history's most profound works on self-discipline and inner peace, navigate the endless scroll of Instagram, the heated debates on Twitter, the highlight reels of Facebook, and the constant notifications that demand our attention every waking moment of the day? Picture this powerful leader who once commanded legions and governed an empire that stretched across 3 continents, now faced with algorithms designed to hijack his attention, influencers selling courses on how to become wealthy overnight, and comment sections filled with anonymous critics hiding behind cartoon profile pictures. In a world where the average person checks their phone over 90 times, a day where social media platforms are designed to capture and monetize our attention, and where digital validation has become a currency more valuable than gold. Marcus Aurelius would face the same challenges we all do, but his approach would be radically different from most of ours. His 2 millennia of wisdom would cut through the digital noise like a sword through silk, offering us a blueprint for maintaining our sanity, dignity, and inner peace in an age of infinite distraction. The same man who dealt with plagues, wars, political conspiracies, and the immense pressure of leading millions of people would bring that same unshakable composure to the chaotic world of social media, where outrage spreads faster than wildfire and people's attention spans have been reduced to mere seconds. Consider for a moment that Marcus Aurelius lived through some of the most challenging times in human history. He faced the Antonine Plague that killed millions, dealt with constant warfare on multiple fronts, managed political intrigue that would make modern politics look like a playground dispute, and still found time to write profound philosophical reflections that continue to guide people today. Now imagine that same level of wisdom, discipline, and emotional regulation applied to the modern challenges of digital overwhelm, online toxicity, and the constant pressure to perform for invisible audiences. If you're struggling with social media, overwhelm, feeling anxious about online interactions, comparing yourself to others online, or simply want to learn how ancient wisdom can transform your digital life, then this video is for you. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell, because we're diving deep into timeless principles that can revolutionize how you engage with technology in the modern world. We're going to explore not just theoretical concepts, but practical strategies that you can implement immediately to create a healthier, more intentional relationship with social media platforms. Marcus Aurelius would begin each day not by reaching for his phone, but by grounding himself in what truly matters. He would ask himself, what is within my control today, and what lies beyond it? This fundamental Stoic principle would immediately reshape his relationship with social media, because he would recognize that while he cannot control what others post, how many likes his content receives, or whether people agree with his thoughts, he can absolutely control how much time he spends scrolling, how he responds to criticism, and what content he chooses to create and consume. This morning ritual would be sacred to him, a time for setting intentions and preparing his mind for whatever digital chaos the day might bring, rather than allowing social media algorithms to dictate his emotional state from the moment he wakes up. The emperor-philosopher would likely set strict boundaries around his social media usage, not out of fear or avoidance, but from a deep understanding that attention is our most precious resource. He wrote in his meditations, "You have power over your mind. Not outside events realize this, and you will find strength applying this wisdom to social media." He would recognize that every minute spent mindlessly scrolling is a minute not spent on meaningful reflection, productive work, or genuine human connection. He would probably designate specific times for social media engagement, perhaps checking his accounts only twice a day, once in the morning after his philosophical reflections, and once in the evening before his daily review of how he had lived up to his principles. Marcus Aurelius would create what we might call digital office hours, treating social media engagement like any other important but bounded activity. Just as he had specific times for handling imperial business, meeting with advisors, and writing his philosophical thoughts, he would allocate specific periods for online interaction and would never allow these digital activities to bleed into other important areas of his life. He would recognize that the always-on nature of social media is fundamentally incompatible with deep thought, meaningful relationships, and inner peace. The Roman emperor would be particularly aware of how the design of social media platforms exploits human psychology. He would study the mechanics of infinite scroll, the psychology behind like buttons, and the way notifications trigger dopamine responses, not to judge these systems harshly, but to understand them well enough to maintain his autonomy. He would approach social media with the same strategic mindset he brought to military campaigns, understanding his opponent. In this case, attention-grabbing algorithms, in order to maintain the upper hand. When it comes to posting content, Marcus Aurelius would be incredibly intentional. Every post, every story, every comment would serve a purpose, either to educate, inspire, or genuinely connect with others. He would never post for validation or to boost his ego. Instead, he would ask himself, does this content add value to the world? Does it reflect my true character? And will it help others grow in wisdom or virtue? If the answer to any of these questions was no, he would simply not post. His social media presence would be an extension of his philosophical practice, a way to share wisdom, test ideas, and engage in meaningful dialogue with people from all walks of life. Before posting anything, Marcus Aurelius would engage in what he might call the virtue test, asking himself whether the content demonstrated the four cardinal virtues of Stoicism: wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance. A photo of an expensive meal might fail the temperance test, while a thoughtful reflection on overcoming adversity might pass the wisdom test. A post criticizing someone publicly might fail the justice test, while sharing encouragement for those facing difficulties might pass the courage test. This systematic approach would ensure that his digital footprint aligned perfectly with his philosophical commitments. His content would likely focus on timeless wisdom, practical philosophy, and genuine reflections on the human condition, rather than posting photos of his breakfast or sharing every fleeting thought that crossed his mind. He would treat social media as a tool for philosophical discourse and meaningful exchange of ideas, much like the letters between ancient philosophers, but accessible to a global audience. He might share daily reflections on Stoic principles, real-world applications of philosophical concepts or thoughtful questions designed to help his followers examine their own lives and choices more deeply. Marcus Aurelius would be particularly mindful of the difference between sharing wisdom and showing off his knowledge. He would recognize that true wisdom often comes in simple, accessible language rather than complex philosophical jargon that excludes people. His posts would be designed to help others, not to demonstrate his intellectual superiority. He would remember his own teaching, that the best way to teach is through example, and would ensure that his online behavior consistently demonstrated the principles he advocated. The Roman emperor would also be extremely cautious about sharing personal information, understanding that privacy is not just about security, but about maintaining the sacredness of certain experiences. He would recognize that not every moment needs to be documented and shared, and that some of life's most meaningful experiences lose their power when they are immediately broadcast to an audience of strangers. He would maintain clear boundaries between his public philosophical teaching and his private personal life. Marcus Aurelius would be particularly mindful of how social media affects his inner state. He would regularly check in with himself, asking, "Am I using these platforms, or are they using me?" If he noticed that social media was making him anxious, envious, or distracted from his duties, he would immediately step back and reassess his usage patterns. He understood that external circumstances, including digital ones, should never have the power to disturb his inner peace. This self-monitoring would be constant and honest, without the self-deception that often characterizes our relationship with technology. The philosopher-emperor would develop what we might call an emotional barometer for his social media usage tracking, not just how much time he spent online, but how different types of content and interactions affected his mood, energy levels, and ability to focus on important tasks. He would notice patterns, perhaps observing that political content left him feeling frustrated, while educational content energized him, or that scrolling late at night disrupted his sleep while morning inspiration posts helped set a positive tone for his day. He would be particularly aware of the phenomenon of emotional contagion, the way that other people's emotions spread through social media networks. Marcus Aurelius would recognize that anger, outrage, and negativity spread much faster and more intensely online than they do in person, and he would protect his emotional equilibrium by being selective about what content he engaged with. He would understand that consuming a steady diet of outrage and conflict, even when it doesn't directly concern him, would gradually erode his inner peace and wisdom. When faced with online criticism, trolls, or negative comments, the Roman emperor would respond with remarkable equanimity. He would remember his own teaching. The best revenge is not to be like your enemy. Instead of engaging in heated arguments or defensive responses, he would either ignore malicious comments entirely or respond with measured, thoughtful replies that elevated the conversation. He would never allow someone else's opinion to trigger an emotional reaction that compromised his dignity or peace of mind. The key would be his ability to distinguish between constructive criticism that could help him grow and destructive criticism that served no purpose other than to tear him down. Marcus Aurelius would approach online criticism as an opportunity to practice one of the most difficult aspects of Stoic philosophy, the discipline of perception. He would ask himself, what can I learn from this feedback? Is there any truth in this criticism that I should consider? And is this person trying to help me improve, or simply trying to cause harm? Based on these reflections, he would choose his response, or non-response accordingly, never letting his ego dictate his actions. When dealing with internet trolls and deliberately provocative comments, Marcus Aurelius would remember his reflection that how much trouble he avoids, who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does, but only to what he does himself. He would recognize that engaging with people who have no interest in genuine dialogue is not just a waste of time, but actively harmful to his own character development. He would practice what modern psychologists call gray rocking, responding to provocative comments with such bland neutrality that the provocateur loses interest and moves on. The Roman emperor would also understand that many people who engage in online aggression are suffering themselves, and that their attacks often have nothing to do with him personally. This compassionate perspective would help him avoid taking online criticism personally while still maintaining appropriate boundaries. He might even feel genuine sympathy for people who spend their time trying to hurt others online, recognizing that such behavior usually stems from deep personal pain. Marcus Aurelius would be extremely selective about who he followed and what content he consumed. He would curate his digital environment just as carefully as he would choose his physical companions, surrounding himself only with accounts that promoted wisdom, virtue, growth, and genuine human connection. He would unfollow accounts that promoted negativity, superficiality, or content that served no constructive purpose in his life, recognizing that we become what we consistently expose our minds to. This digital curation would be an ongoing process requiring regular evaluation and adjustment as accounts changed their focus or as his own needs and interests evolved. The Roman emperor would understand that social media algorithms are designed to show us content that provokes strong emotional reactions, often negative ones, because engagement, driven by anger or outrage, keeps people scrolling longer. To counter this, he would actively seek out accounts that promoted wisdom, contemplation, learning, and positive human connection. He would follow philosophers, educators, artists, scientists, and others who contributed meaningful content to the digital landscape, while avoiding accounts that trafficked in gossip, controversy, or manufactured outrage. Marcus Aurelius would create what we might call a digital council of advisors following accounts, of people whose wisdom and character he respected and whose perspectives challenged him to grow. This digital council would serve a similar function to the actual advisors he relied on during his reign, providing diverse viewpoints, thoughtful analysis, and moral guidance. He would regularly evaluate whether the accounts he followed were making him wiser, more compassionate, and more effective in his daily life, or whether they were simply entertaining distractions. He would be particularly careful about following accounts that promoted luxury, materialism, or lifestyle comparison, understanding that constant exposure to other people's wealth, possessions, or apparently perfect lives could gradually erode his own contentment and gratitude. The philosopher-emperor would remember his own teaching that wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants, and would curate his digital environment to support this principle rather than undermine it. The Roman emperor would also be selective about joining online groups and communities, understanding that digital communities, like physical ones, have their own cultures, norms, and influences. He would seek out online spaces dedicated to learning, philosophical discussion, constructive problem-solving, and mutual support, while avoiding communities focused on gossip, complaint, or tearing others down. He would recognize that spending time in toxic online communities could gradually influence his own thinking and behavior in negative ways. The philosopher-emperor would use social media as a tool for practicing Stoic virtues. He would see every interaction as an opportunity to practice patience, compassion, and wisdom. When someone disagreed with him, he would view it as a chance to either learn something new or to practice explaining his position with clarity and kindness. When faced with tragedy or difficulty in the world trending on social media, he would use it as a reminder of the impermanence of all things and the importance of focusing on what we can control, rather than becoming overwhelmed by the constant stream of bad news that dominates many social media feeds. He would use these reports as opportunities to practice the Stoic discipline of focusing on his own sphere of influence. Marcus Aurelius would approach social media disagreements as philosophical exercises, asking himself, how can I respond to this person in a way that demonstrates wisdom and compassion rather than simply being right? He would remember that the goal of any discussion should be mutual understanding and growth, not victory over an opponent. This approach would radically transform his online interactions, making them opportunities for genuine connection and learning rather than battles to be won when encountering posts about global tragedies, natural disasters, or social problems. The Roman emperor would resist the urge to feel overwhelmed or helpless. Instead, he would ask himself, what can I do about this situation in my own sphere of influence? How can I contribute to solutions rather than simply consuming information about problems? He might use such posts as reminders to donate to relevant charities, volunteer in his local community, or simply treat the people in his daily life with greater kindness and compassion. Marcus Aurelius would be particularly mindful of the way social media can create a sense of false urgency, making every trending topic seem like a crisis that demands immediate attention and response. He would remember that most of the things that seem urgent online are not actually urgent in any meaningful sense, and that wisdom often requires stepping back from the immediate emotional reaction to consider whether and how to respond thoughtfully. The philosopher, emperor, would use social media as a laboratory for practicing emotional regulation, observing his own reactions to different types of content, and using those observations to better understand his own character strengths and areas for growth. If he noticed himself becoming angry at a particular type of post, he would explore what that anger revealed about his own attachments and expectations. If he found himself feeling envious of someone's apparent success or happiness, he would use that feeling as an opportunity to examine his own relationship with material goods and external validation. Marcus Aurelius would be particularly conscious of the comparison trap that social media creates. He would remind himself that what people share online is merely a curated highlight reel, not the full reality of their lives. He would remember his own insight, how much trouble he avoids, who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does, but only to what he does himself when scrolling. Through others, success stories, vacation photos, or achievements, he would feel neither envy nor inadequacy, but would instead focus on his own path and progress. The Roman emperor would understand that comparison is not only the thief of joy, but also a fundamental misunderstanding of how human flourishing actually works. He would remind himself that every person's journey is unique, shaped by different circumstances, challenges, opportunities, and inner resources. What appears to be success or happiness in someone else's social media posts might be masking struggles, challenges, or emptiness that are not visible to outside observers. Marcus Aurelius would focus on his own growth, his own contribution to the world, and his own alignment with virtue, rather than measuring himself against the carefully curated presentations of others online. The philosopher emperor would be particularly aware of how social media encourages what psychologists call upward social comparison, the tendency to compare ourselves to people who appear to be doing better than us in some area of life. This type of comparison almost inevitably leads to feelings of inadequacy, frustration, or envy. Marcus Aurelius would counter this tendency by practicing gratitude for his own circumstances and focusing on how he could use his unique gifts and opportunities to serve others and live according to his values. When he did encounter posts about others' achievements or good fortune, Marcus Aurelius would practice what Buddhists call mudita, or sympathetic joy, the ability to feel genuinely happy for others, success without any sense of personal lack or competition. He would see others flourishing as evidence that good things are possible in the world, and as inspiration for his own continued growth and contribution, rather than as a threat to his own worth or happiness. Marcus Aurelius would also be mindful of the way that social media can create artificial scarcity, making us feel like there's only so much success, happiness, or recognition to go around, and that others having good things somehow diminishes our own possibilities. He would remember that wisdom, virtue, and inner peace are not zero-sum games, and that others achieving these things actually makes them more available to everyone. He would treat social media notifications like any other external disturbance, something that has no inherent power over his peace of mind. Unless he gives it that power, most likely he would turn off notifications entirely, or check his accounts at predetermined times, rather than allowing them to interrupt his thoughts and activities throughout the day. He would recognize that the constant ping of notifications is designed to create addiction and would refuse to let technology control his attention. Marcus Aurelius would understand that notifications are essentially other people and algorithms making demands on his time and attention, and he would be very selective about which demands he chooses to honor. The Roman emperor would create what we might call notification sovereignty, establishing clear boundaries about when and how he could be reached digitally. He would recognize that the expectation of constant availability and immediate response that social media creates is fundamentally incompatible with deep thinking, meaningful work, and inner peace. He would establish and communicate clear expectations about his response, times refusing to participate in the culture of immediate digital gratification. Marcus Aurelius would be particularly aware of how notifications fragment attention and disrupt the flow states that are necessary for creative work, philosophical reflection, and meaningful conversation. He would protect his most important activities, whether writing, thinking, or spending time with loved ones, from digital interruption. Understanding that the quality of attention we bring to our activities determines their value and meaning. The philosopher, emperor would also recognize that notifications are designed to trigger what psychologists call intermittent reinforcement, the same psychological mechanism that makes gambling addictive. By delivering unpredictable rewards in the form of likes, comments and messages at random intervals, social media platforms create a compulsive checking behavior that can be extremely difficult to break. Marcus Aurelius would protect himself from this manipulation by taking control of when and how he received information rather than allowing algorithms to determine his schedule. He would establish specific times during the day for checking and responding to social media messages, treating digital communication like correspondence that deserves thoughtful attention rather than knee-jerk reactions. This approach would not only improve the quality of his online interactions, but also free up significant mental energy for more important pursuits. When it comes to digital detoxing, Marcus Aurelius would regularly engage in periods of complete disconnection from social media, not as a punishment or because he viewed technology as evil, but because he understood the importance of solitude, reflection, and uninterrupted thought. He would use these breaks to reconnect with himself, practice mindfulness, and engage more deeply with the physical world around him. These digital Sabbaths would be as regular and sacred as his daily philosophical reflections, providing essential balance to his online engagement. The Roman emperor would approach digital detoxing strategically, understanding that the goal is not to suffer through withdrawal, but to rediscover the richness of offline life. He would plan his detox periods carefully, ensuring that he had meaningful activities to fill the time that would otherwise be spent scrolling, reading books, spending time in nature, having deep conversations with friends, or engaging in creative pursuits that required sustained attention. Marcus Aurelius would be particularly aware of how social media can create a kind of mental hyperactivity where our minds become accustomed to constant stimulation and find it difficult to settle into the slower rhythms of contemplation and deep thought. He would use digital detox periods to retrain his mind to find satisfaction in stillness, to appreciate the subtle pleasures of the present moment, and to rediscover his own thoughts and feelings without the constant input of other people's opinions and experiences. During his detox periods, the philosopher-emperor would pay particular attention to how his mood, energy levels, and ability to concentrate changed as he stayed away from social media. He would notice whether he felt more peaceful, more creative, more connected to the people physically present in his life, or more aware of the natural world around him. These observations would help him optimize his social media usage when he returned to it. Marcus Aurelius would also use digital detox periods to practice what Stoics call preferred indifference, recognizing that while social media can be useful, it is not necessary for a good life. He would regularly remind himself that humans lived meaningful, fulfilling lives for thousands of years before social media existed, and that his own happiness and wisdom do not depend on digital connection. This perspective would help him maintain a healthy relationship with technology, avoiding both addiction and anxiety about missing out. The Roman emperor would be particularly mindful of how social media affects his relationships with others. He would never allow digital interactions to replace genuine face-to-face conversations or meaningful personal connections. He would use social media to enhance his relationships, not replace them, reaching out to friends privately rather than just liking their posts, and ensuring that his online presence supported rather than detracted from his real-world relationships. Marcus Aurelius would recognize that human beings are fundamentally social creatures who need genuine connection, intimacy, and presence, none of which can be fully satisfied through digital interaction. He would be especially careful not to let social media create a false sense of connection where liking someone's posts or following their updates substitutes for actual relationship maintenance. Real relationships require time, attention, vulnerability, and presence, all of which are difficult to achieve through the filtered medium of social media. Marcus Aurelius would use social media to stay informed about his friends' lives and to reach out when appropriate, but he would prioritize in-person meetings, phone calls, and other forms of direct communication for maintaining his most important relationships. The philosopher-emperor would also be mindful of how social media can sometimes damage relationships by creating misunderstandings through the loss of tone and context that occurs in digital communication. He would be extra careful about the language he used online, ensuring that his meaning was clear and that his tone conveyed respect and kindness. He would avoid having serious or emotionally charged conversations through social media platforms, preferring to have such discussions in person or over the phone, where non-verbal communication could help prevent misunderstandings. Marcus Aurelius would be particularly aware of how social media can create what psychologists call social comparison within our personal networks. Seeing friends and family members' apparent successes or happiness can sometimes trigger envy or feelings of inadequacy in ways that are more intense than comparisons. With strangers, the Roman emperor would counter this tendency by focusing on genuine care and concern for his loved ones, celebrating their successes without reservation, and offering support during their challenges. He would also recognize that social media can sometimes replace genuine emotional support with superficial digital gestures. A like or a brief comment might feel like support, but it doesn't provide the same depth of connection and care that a phone call, a visit, or a heartfelt letter would provide. Marcus Aurelius would ensure that his most important relationships received the attention and care they deserved beyond what could be provided through social media interactions. Marcus Aurelius would approach social media with the same discipline he brought to governing an empire. He would have clear rules and principles guiding his usage, and he would stick to them regardless of what others were doing or what was trending at the moment. His approach would be consistent, principled, and always aligned with his deepest values and philosophical commitments. The same systematic thinking that helped him manage the complex challenges of ruling millions of people would be applied to the seemingly simpler but surprisingly complex challenge of maintaining his integrity and peace of mind in the digital age. The Roman emperor would create what we might call a personal social media constitution, a set of principles and guidelines that would govern his online behavior just as the Roman constitution governed the empire. These principles might include commitments to truthfulness, kindness, respect for others, protection of privacy, focus on wisdom and virtue, and regular evaluation of whether his social media usage was supporting or undermining his personal growth and ability to serve others. Marcus Aurelius would regularly review his social media behavior against these principles, asking himself whether his recent posts, comments, and interactions reflected the kind of person he wanted to be and contributed to the kind of world he wanted to live in. If he found areas where his behavior fell short of his standards, he would make immediate corrections and adjust his approach going forward. This constant self-evaluation and course correction would ensure that his digital presence remained aligned with his deepest values, even as technology and social norms evolved. The philosopher-emperor would also establish clear consequences for himself if he violated his own social media principles, just as there were consequences for breaking laws in the Roman Empire. These might include temporary abstinence from social media, additional time spent in philosophical reflection, or increased focus on offline activities that reinforced his commitment to wisdom and virtue. The key would be that these consequences would be self-imposed and designed to strengthen his character rather than punish himself. Marcus Aurelius would be particularly disciplined about not using social media as an escape from difficult emotions or challenging situations. He would recognize that the temptation to scroll through social media when feeling bored, anxious, or overwhelmed is a form of avoidance that prevents us from developing resilience and wisdom. Instead of reaching for his phone during difficult moments, he would practice sitting with discomfort, processing his emotions through reflection or discussion with trusted friends, and finding constructive ways to address whatever challenges he was facing. He would be particularly aware of the addictive nature of social media platforms, understanding that they are designed to capture and hold attention through psychological manipulation techniques. He would study these mechanisms, not to use them, but to protect himself from them, maintaining his agency and freedom of choice in how he engaged with digital technology. When sharing personal thoughts or experiences, Marcus Aurelius would do so with careful consideration, asking himself whether sharing this information serves a constructive purpose or merely satisfies his ego. He would be particularly cautious about sharing details of his private life, understanding that some experiences are meant to be kept sacred, and that not everything needs to be broadcast to the world. The philosopher-emperor would use social media as a mirror for self-examination. When he noticed himself getting upset by something online, he would ask, "Why does this bother me? What does my reaction reveal about my own character and attachments?" rather than blaming the platform or other users. He would use these moments as opportunities for growth and self-understanding. Marcus Aurelius would be extremely mindful of the language. He used online understanding that words have power, and that digital communication often lacks the nuance and context of face-to-face interaction. He would choose his words carefully, ensuring that they reflected his character and values, and he would always err on the side of kindness and respect, even when disagreeing with others. He would also be aware of the echo chamber effect that social media can create, and would actively seek out diverse perspectives and viewpoints. He would follow people who challenged his thinking, not to argue with them, but to expand his understanding and ensure that his mind remained open and flexible rather than becoming rigid or dogmatic. The Roman emperor would treat his online presence as an extension of his character, understanding that how he behaved digitally was just as important as how he behaved in person. He would never say or do anything online that he would not be comfortable saying or doing in front of his closest friends, family, or advisors. Marcus Aurelius would be particularly conscious of time as a finite resource and would regularly evaluate whether his social media usage was aligned with his priorities and values. He would ask himself, "If I only had 1 year left to live, would I spend this time scrolling through social media, or would I focus on more meaningful activities?" This perspective would help him maintain healthy boundaries and priorities. When it comes to influencer culture and the commodification of personal life that dominates modern social media, Marcus Aurelius would be deeply skeptical. He would recognize that turning one's personal life into content for others' consumption often corrupts the authenticity and meaning of those experiences. He would Be wary of any approach to social media that prioritized metrics, followers, or financial gain over genuine human connection and wisdom sharing. The philosopher emperor would also be mindful of the impact his social media usage had on his ability to think deeply and concentrate. He would notice if constant connectivity was fragmenting his attention or making it harder for him to engage in sustained reflection and contemplation. If so, he would adjust his usage accordingly, prioritizing his mental clarity and depth of thought over digital engagement. Marcus Aurelius would approach social media with the same mindfulness he brought to all aspects of life. He would be present and intentional in his digital interactions, never using social media as an escape from reality or uncomfortable emotions, but rather as a tool that, when used wisely, could enhance his understanding of the world and his connections with others. In the end, Marcus Aurelius would handle social media in 2025 the same way he handled every other aspect of life, with wisdom, discipline, intention, and an unwavering commitment to virtue. He would use these platforms to serve his highest values and goals, while never allowing them to compromise his inner peace, character, or genuine relationships with others. His approach would serve as a powerful example of how ancient wisdom can guide us through the challenges of modern life. The lessons we can learn from imagining Marcus Aurelius in our digital age are profound and practical. We can set clear boundaries around our technology, curate our digital environment, intentionally respond to online criticism with grace and wisdom, use social media to enhance rather than replace real relationships, and always prioritize our inner peace and character over external validation or digital success. By applying these timeless Stoic principles to our modern social media usage, we can transform our relationship with technology from one of addiction and anxiety to one of intention, wisdom, and genuine connection. We can use these powerful tools to grow, learn, and contribute to the world while maintaining our sanity, dignity, and peace of mind in an increasingly chaotic digital landscape. Remember that you have the power to choose how you engage with social media. You can scroll mindlessly and reactively, or you can approach these platforms with the wisdom and intentionality of a philosopher emperor. The choice, as Marcus Aurelius would remind us, is always yours, and it's one that will shape not only your digital experience, but your entire quality of life.